Hello everyone. This is Jyothsna Hegde with NRI Pulse. Today, we have with us the spirited, spontaneous, and supremely insightful author and my friend Kiran Bhat. A Georgia-born author, Kiran is a global citizen who has visited 135 countries. He did the 135th one very recently too. Lived in 18 different places and speaks 12 different languages. He is primarily known as the author of We of the Forsaken World, but he has authored books in 4 different languages and has his own writing published in the Kenyan Review, the Brooklyn Rail, the Colorado Review, the Radical Art Review, just to name a few. Now, however, Kiran is here with us today to talk about his latest work, Girar, which is a multi-platform subscription-based narrative slated for release next week, that is on April 13th. Welcome, Kiran.
Thank you, George.
I know you're super busy with your launch next week, so let's get started right away. Now, rather than the usual format, where we start with talking about the book and the narrative, I really want to talk about, that the special launch that you have going on with this book, actually. So Girar is not exactly a regular paperback or hardcover quote unquote book, right? So it's rather a streaming novel that takes place in 365 different places around the planet. Now, and I, for a fact, know that you came up with this concept way before the pandemic hit us, and all of us started going digital for our reading requirements. Now, tell us about how and why you came up with this concept.
So first of all, Jyothsna, thank you for having me. I'm writing a book that has, say, one section in Turkmenistan, another section in Fiji, another section in Botswana, and different places in even some of these countries, because some of these countries do not fit into a label of just a country. They themselves are a magnitude of many different lands coming together to form a nation, but might be 7 or 8 countries. So it's a compilation of just a lot of different topographies that I think deserve to be kind of categorized in a global novel. And so I think there's several reasons why I wanted to write Hilar. Hilar is a Spanish word which means to turn. It's a h, like the jota in Spanish, but the G is the gyrate in English, so it's a little different. But regardless, I think I wanted to create, a novel that was the globe. I wanted to think, how could I capture the entire planet into one narrative, and to create a narrative that would not just be a narrative, like this one telling narrative that then encapsulates or generalizes so many continents or peoples or nationalities or cultures, but to create a space where all of the different heads or the little different peoples who come to create our ideas of mentality or culture could come together in the space of a form of literature. And I got this idea when I was living in Spain. I went to Segovia and I saw this beautiful mosque/cathedral/synagogue, which merged 3 very different religions into one building. And something like akin to a darshana hit me, where I was just like, if I can envision these 3 very different religions coming together in coexistence, what about all the cultures of the world? So I didn't know how I was going to write that book. I wanted to write it, but I didn't know how. So I wrote a book called We of the Forsaken World, which I think was another attempt at that project. And I've done a lot of other things that attempt that project. But Hilar is that real attempt to capture globalization and give it this form and this name inside of a literary focus, a literary space. And it's not a novel not because I would love it to someday be traditionally published in the form of a novel if I'm successful enough to have that happen. But I think globalization is from the internet. It comes from this space where right now, if I'm in Florida and you're in Georgia now, but you could be in anywhere and you could still talk to me. So, and the pandemic made that very clear, right? So I wanted to create a space which had that kind of telepathic communication that comes with the internet, but launch stories through it. Give you a second and a moment in Botswana, give you a moment in Peru, give you a moment in any of these random tracts of land that we've given names.
So why choose, you could have done that in a hardcover book too. So why did you choose the digital space for your launch? And probably that's going to stay there for a long time too.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and a book in certain ways is a safer choice. I mean, I'm sure that if I want to get and I do want to get it traditionally published, it would reach more people and it would be maybe more successful. But in the thing is there's still limitations to a book. First of all, the publishing world itself is extremely slow and kind of conservative. Even if I have this, like, say, book one, this first compilation ready, it would still take probably 3-4 years from now, with all the rejections and all the people reading it, to finally get it somewhere, and we don't even know who that would be. And I wanted to capture something that really captured real time. Like, if life is unfolding in April 15th, April 16th, in this random, like, mountainous region on, in this certain part of Nepal, or in this, like, desert, in between Arizona and Mexico, I wanted it to feel like, okay, this is what life is feeling like on that place on April 15th at 7 p.m. And I'm using this mother-father archetype, or these kind of, like, archetypal creature, like these archetype characters. Yeah, not creatures. Characters who, although I did think about that maybe something we can talk about later is the other ways I want to take this, but these archetypal characters who kind of represent what we see in literature as a whole, like just the general archetypes we see in literature, but taking, say, a mother figure, a father figure, and then readapting it, say, into a Syrian context, or readapting it into an Atacama desert context, or readapting it into, like, a Kodagu context, like that, and then playing with that kind of that universal-ish narrative, that kind of narrative that we just retell in different forms, but in these kinds of different cultures and contexts, and then by telling each installment in a different cultural context, creating this bigger kind of narrative that kind of tells us the story of the globe.
So basically, people have to, if they would like, they could subscribe for all of the stories or just parts of it, right? So that's how, talk to about that scheme.
Yeah.
How people...
Generally, we have a fairly unique form of also. So basically, in order to access Hilar, it's currently a digital space, like a website. And the stories stream from there. They stream in real time. So if, say, a story is taking place on April 16th at 7 p.m. in IST, whether you're in CST, whether you're in AEDT in Australia, you would get that story at that place at that time set in, I don't know, Kodagu. It would do that for 10 years, from April 13th to the end of 2029. And in order to access it, the first 6 stories are free. They're the first 6 stories of book 1, and anyone can sign up and get them for free. There's no money that they're required to give. Then afterwards, there's 4 stories, and those 4 stories are also, like, just New Year stories. They're just, like, kind of some fun stories I wrote to experiment with this last year. But then afterwards, there's a charge of about $1, $1.50, €1 or 100 rupees, which is a very minimal cost. It's just to keep the maintenance of the website. And, right now, while I'm pleased with it in certain forms, I wanted more videos, I wanted more multimedia installations, but that costs a lot of money. So right now I need to keep it relatively, I need to start, building that up, basically. So I think $1 a month is fairly reasonable and affordable for anyone. Even I was saying this morning to someone in India, with 100 rupees, all it is just you basically didn't get biryani one day at your favorite restaurant, and you just decide to spend it on a novel. And again, for 30 days, you get a lot of content, a lot of stories, hopefully soon videos, multimedia installations, as I can start, getting those up. But yes, the point is, yes. So for that 100 rupee charge or $1 charge for a month, you'll get a lot, and that's how you'll continue to access. And the stories get streamed to your email. I should have said that as well. They come directly to your email. So you get an email and it says a story is being told. You click on the link and then you get the story as if it's happening then.
Wonderful. So does this mean there is scope for some changes along the way and, to the original, I mean, because, it's digital, right? So
what we're thinking is we'll do a soft launch April 13th to May 12th of the first book, which deals with mother and father in kind of having son comes back home. So the main cornerstone story is that mother and father are these kind of like old retired people who are, they've lived a life, but their son lives in another life. And the COVID situation causes son to have to come back due to the economic fallout, and he has no job, and he has to come and he has to kind of make amends or try to make amends with his parents, and how that works is part of book 1. But the point is that book will be its own core book of, say, 30 stories for a section of like every day. So every day you'll get those emails for 30 days, and then that tells the whole story of book 1. And and so these forms of installments and stories, and then there'll just be random stories. It just keeps releasing, and over time it tells a more greater story about how mother and father come together, what life is like for them.
Wonderful. Now, you talked about the opening story, right? Which is, I know, titled The New Year. right? So basically, this is centered around a date that's significant in Hindu culture. And I know that you've also tied it sort of with the date of your launch. Can you talk about
Yes,
that a little bit?
So first of all, maybe I should say, like, it takes place on the day of Ugadi. Ugadi for Kannadigas is the Kannadiga New Year. For some people who are from Thailand or Cambodia, it would also be a form of Sankranti that they practice. That is also a New Year, and it's basically the start of the year for people who come from that context. And being a person who identifies from that context, I wanted this to be the start of the 2020s, and also I want to say from the start of 2020s to the end. Right? So my start is 2020 because that's when my new year starts, and then the goal is to finish it December 31st, 2029. It's like the Western end of May.
Well, I think why don't we just look at the website and give people a feel of what Hilar is all about.
Yes, good idea.
All right, let me share the screen here. Girar.world, and this is how you can subscribe. You have the PayPal here, or you can use any of your credit cards using Stripe. And let's move on to how you can actually look at the stories. So here we go to the dashboard here, and all of Kiran's stories are listed here, so let's pick Ethiopia, for example. And there we have it. This happens on 11th September 2020. So the story is right there. And Kiran will probably have some more multimedia coming up at a later time.
Yes. And the story took place on September 2020, September Ethiopian New Year. So reflection of the new year in Ethiopian context. So it's supposed to be like if see something be happening, celebrating with her friends and doing the Ababayosh, which to represent like that, captured.
Wonderful. So then we travel all the way to Bangkok, Thailand,
which is where they're having Songkran, which is like the New Year. Perspective.
So that's 13th April as well, just like ours. And we have the story right there.
Yes. And then but these are just the New Year stories, Then the other types of stories, we have the
gotcha.
Collective stories.
Gotcha. So these are the New Year stories. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Done.
So what question read this?
See, this is one of, to me, to someone, especially someone like me, I have to take my daughter everywhere. I take her to dance, music, whatnot classes, and I'm sitting there waiting, right? So the best part about this for me, in particular is I can just open up something like this. I don't need to carry a book. I don't need to worry about what I'm carrying with me or not. Just open up this page and, I can just read up the story. And I get the feel of a book. It's not like reading a website. You actually have like a story here, and there's so much that's gone from your personal travel. So it's so much more than just reading a story over here, and that makes it even more special, right? So yeah, I really love this concept. And, if you're traveling, let's say to another country or another place, so you can just, maybe you're on the flight and you can just open up the story that relates to that place and you can read up that story. It just makes it all the more interesting. And we go back to home. And yeah, there you have it. So, it's just 1.5 US dollars, just $1 per month or 100 rupees a month. And, you get to subscribe to these wonderful stories.
And another thing I'll say is that $1.5, $100, I'm not saying it's nothing, but it isn't a high. And I want this. I want a lot. At the moment, I need to find a space and invest that. And that yet. So if you do subscribe, please know that your feed, I'm open to criticism. I'm open to both the audio and the visual stuff that we want feedback on that, but also if you think like you wrote something about Portugal, like I don't know, if you have one thing up and people think it's totally touching and you can fix it. The beauty of a project like this is it is writing itself as like something. So unlike a physical book which remains fixed and is stuck like that, it publishes this be built and reimagined and transformed to be in different content. I'm excited to have that be that process. So I think that seeing it evolve, seeing the stories change, seeing my style evolve, mature, seeing the website evolve and mature, I think that's also part of the process. So know that you are not $100 move to something beyond just my pockets, and it's something that I appreciate the rest of my life.
Kiran, just as you were saying, you're open to inputs and you might even change a story there may be something, a nitty-gritty that's particular to that area. You would change it based on the user input. I think also makes it even more interesting because you're making the user, the reader, part of your story, right? So they become part of the process too. I think that's the most unique thing about this, is that you're making the reader part of your narrative.
Yes, in that sense. Story novel, which I think also fits to the general theme that globalization and novel all are equally part of the narrative. So I want this to happen a little bit, even though I'm kind of the main artist constructing it.
Definitely. Well, we're going to stop sharing the screen now. Okay, so what lies at the core of Girar and basically what is the goal of the story?
I think it is to reflect the difference and to show, for example, how despite tradition, how despite just a difference of opinion as well, people can eventually come to love each other, or that love will eventually allow us to transcend those differences. I think I wanted to tell the story of how a family can come together, that there's a mother who's very traditional when it comes to her values and social values, a father who is maybe traditional when it comes to their ideas of work and what is stability in a job or whatever. And then, you can have, say, a son who is LGBT, very openly LGBT, living abroad, still trying to deal with his problems, etc. But despite those differences and despite the culture as well, there's still, you can find those types of people in, say, the south of the US, you can find them in South Africa, you can find them in Portugal, you can find such people anywhere. So trying to take those certain types of people that fit those personalities and maybe, of course, change the narrative of the story, play with the local cultures, play with even concepts, festivals, ideas that would only exist in those places, but to tell this kind of greater overarching story of a mother, father, and son finally finding a way to kind of make peace and find a space of acceptance for each other.
Yes. Now, Girar is, as much about global cultures as it is about, families and relationships, right? So as someone who has traveled and lived across the globe, do you find like a recurring theme or let's say a common thread, that binds human relationships? And is that what you have used to connect these stories in Hilar?
Yeah, ironically, even though I'm saying that I'm trying to create this kind of global-ish space, when it comes to something like that, I think it'd be very difficult to give, say, an overarching, like, one answer to anything. One is because each human is different, not even just if they're born in Botswana or Turkey, just any human, even you or I or this other person over there would be very different from each other, right? So I think that the vastness of human difference is so overwhelming that it would be hard to say that there is something that unites all of us or gives us this kind of transcending edge. But what does exist is these certain things that we as humans respond to, and those responses perhaps change in culture or they manifest in different cultures, but we have certain proclivities that then we all kind of rise towards. And when we see those, whether it's in something from the 15th century, or whether it's something in another country just in our time period or whatever, we feel a sense of resonance. We feel like a sense of empathy. We feel a sense of something that's similar to me, even though this person is so different in all the superficial ways. And I wanted to play with that in this book, this idea that there can be that resonance that in each of these different cultures, despite them being different, but despite even the versions of mother and father, son being so different from each other, there's still something that is allowing all these very different, almost in these almost like completely separate stories to interconnect and become like one kind of seamless greater story, which is through that running thread of how each of these small little actions and each of these small little places can kind of connect and form a greater storyline. So it's so that's what I was trying to explore. But whether I can say then that every person in that one place is similar to then every other person in another place, that's another thing.
Sure. Now, Hilar is mostly inspired from your travels, and you're a polyglot. So when you write and when you put yourself in these different countries, and let's say you put yourself in the Spanish-speaking part of the world, so do you shift, your thinking to that regional language?
Definitely. I usually try when I try to write dialogue, I try to think in that language and then write it in English, which had made it really difficult for some of the sections when they're being edited, because some people, like if I write in Kannada but in English or Japanese in English, the structure of the sentence is completely inverted. So like I have to like find a way to like kind of make that readable in English, because people are like, what does this even mean? But but I tried to do that in a way that to the extent I could, but also to make it good English. And even one thing that I had a lot of fun doing is also playing with the way different languages play with their script. Like, so if, for example, if a part of the story is set in a country like Mauritania or in Morocco or Lebanon, where people speak Arabic, rather than going from left to right, how we do in English, it goes from right to left. And playing with like the quotations, the punctuation marks, and to make it feel like, okay, this is really a transcription of, say, a section written in Arabic or written in Spanish, but you're reading it as if it's in English, even though it's not supposed to really be in English. So that's something I really tried to do.
Wow, wonderful. So, it is true, obviously, that we live in a globalized world. But, your stories are spread across the globe, in Hirar. But do you really think people are globalized enough to say, hey, I want stories from all over the world? And because they have the option of just subscribing to a few stories, do you think people would, do you fear that, people might only subscribe to the stories that they might connect to?
That's an interesting thought. I mean, I feel like there's two questions being embedded there. One is, do I think that people are of the level of globalization which will like necessarily appreciate something like this? I have no idea. I mean, I don't want to underestimate people either. You can meet some extremely open-minded people in villages in Kenya, and I've traveled and I've been with people who are extremely global-minded, and they come from like a Luo village in Western Kenya, and they think a lot about the world, or in Mongolia or wherever, so you can't generalize or judge. But that being said, of course, I don't know if a lot of people, most people are very concerned about whatever is happening in their country or in their hometown, and they don't think much about the outside world. I think a novel like this is a great attempt to try to not necessarily educate such people. This is a work of my imagination. I don't think it's really representative of the cultures it embodies, but maybe to start making them think a little bit more like, okay, well, this was an interesting story. Now I'm curious about what life in Armenia could be like. Or I'm a little bit more curious about what life in Tunisia could be like, So it's like maybe that could spark some curiosity and some desire to empathize with people who are from different parts of the planet, But I also don't know. I think it's also a very personal story in a certain way. I think that the themes I'm playing with are themes a lot of people can resonate with and understand, but I don't know if there's necessarily themes that then everyone would kind of immediately relate or respond to either. So it's hard to say, but this is my attempt.
Well, we'll see, right? It remains to be seen.
I was thinking last night, of course, I want to get subscribers. I want people to read it. I want to be able to fund my iterations, but we think of, say, the Buddha when he first started meditating, and he just found that stub and he just sat there and he just did it. He just literally chose to meditate for days upon days upon days. And it was not because he wanted people to observe him that he meditated. He did it to transcend himself. So people have been telling me, some things about the website are still under development. Maybe you should not launch April 13th. And I was thinking, No, I want to create a live diary of life as it happens to us, as if they're real facts but pieces of fiction from all the corners of the world, from the start of the 2020s to the end of it. And I think just the idea that I am determined and dedicated to doing it, I think that is enough. I mean, I don't necessarily need to have 100,000 subscribers. I don't necessarily know if I need to have anyone watching it even, because the fact that I want to do it becomes its own form of meditation, this own form of I'm going to just sit and dedicate myself to this act. And I cannot just stop it just because I feel like no one is watching me do it. I have to just do it and just hope for the best and hope that it does something for something. But I can't control the outcomes. I just can only control my actions.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right from the Gita. So, do you travel to write, or does your need for writing inspire your travels?
A mix. It's such an interesting question and very chicken or the egg type of thing. And I don't know myself. People have asked it all the time to me, and I've never understood the answer for myself. I really don't know. I think I'm very much a global citizen. I need to be in a new place, and I like that feeling. But I think that if I were not writing a book like this, I would also be significantly less like that. I also like staying in a place like where I am, say in Florida, and just spending my days, idly passing time with either writing or, doing, like watching television, playing video games even. So it's not like, I think that even a stable, completely boring, quote unquote, boring life is fine with me as well. But then there's this part of me that's like, no, I want to create this greater global prism of literature. And I also have to spend time in these places to understand them. I need to meet people from these places. There's a strange like kind of move towards action and then this move towards lethargy. And it's a constant push between the two. But I think, yes, definitely to some extent, I'd always live globally and I'd live in between countries, but I also am deeply determined to do it because of what I want to say.
Now, how did the pandemic affect your writing and, the publishing process?
I think it affected definitely the theme because it gave this idea of a son, returning because he was like, the son who's otherwise very settled and stable and happily living his, say, LGBT alternative life in another country suddenly has to come home because he was grounded by COVID. I think that's something a lot of people can relate to. And it's a factual thing for a lot of people. So I think that, and it's also just how life, if I'm trying to be accurate, would be right now. So it definitely affected on a thematic level for sure. I think thematically, the story was definitely improved for that reason, although then there's always these changes in lockdowns and curfews. And because, again, I wanted to be accurate to the day, it's hard to predict those things and make sense of it. That being said, from a personal perspective, it's interesting. So far, I've lived this COVID life in two different places. One is Australia, one is in the US, and in neither case do I feel like it's affected me. I mean, of course, it's affected my movement, my ability to interact with people. But on a writing level, I've always been a very productive writer, though. I always try to knock out 3,000 words a day, and it's never dried up. I've always been like, I get up and I go. Sometimes, of course, you have those days where you don't want to do anything, but I let them happen. I'm fine with that. That's part of life. But I just get up the next day and I go back to work. So.
Expect like a drastic change in the literary space. I mean in the post-pandemic world, right? Because especially in the digital space, given the way people are moving over with your reading habits and even writing, especially with the launch like yours, right? So it's very unique and maybe people will really pick up on that.
It's very hard to say. I've thought about it a lot. The problem is if you had asked me a year ago, I'd have said, absolutely, I think more of these digital things are going to happen. But what I've seen in the last few months is there's been such a allergy now to anything digital. People are now going in the complete opposite direction. People are tired of Zoom. People are tired of digital projects. It was too much because I think the problem with the world we live in now is that we get these things instantaneously and everyone thinks this direction is going to happen. But the moment then that we launch too quickly in that direction, everyone wants to move in the other direction again. So it makes things even more unpredictable. So I don't know. I still think there's a place for a lot of these traditional things and humans are fundamentally conservative. But yeah, I wanted this to be like an experiment, this idea of, we stream videos, we stream audio. Why not novels? Why not read a novel once a day in that kind of, you get it delivered to you kind of way in the way you do video or audio. But whether it becomes a common recurring thing is hard to say.
Yeah. Kiran, you've obviously chosen, the pathless travel, as they would say it, as far as the narratives, whether it's Be of the Forsaken World or even in Hirar. And, you've sort of carefully steered away from the stereotypes, so to speak. Now, what changes do you wish to see, let's say, in the Indian American corridor of literature?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I'm not the type of person to impose my ideas of what literature should be for others. I think I know a lot of Indian American authors, and all of them are doing their own thing. And of course, some, heavily try to do that, trying to write about being an Indian origin person in the US. Other people are more experimental. Other people like to traverse countries. Other people like to be like to try to write extremely Indian and
Right.
but still as an American. So I really don't know. I don't know if I can again say that everyone should move in this one direction or another. I do think I want to argue for a globalist literature. I do want to argue for a literature that kind of plays with this world, not as I say, this is a Namibia, this is a Turkey, this is an America, and I have to write a national narrative or this kind of national epic to this nation. But how do we write this kind of epic or this idea of this kind of totalizing literary story from a global perspective, global in the sense of from like a space where all these topographies are united. So I think that interests me, but I just happen to be one Indian American writing that direction. And then there would be other people from different kind of lifestyles and cultures who might be interested in it, but also most likely might not.
So why is it that Kiran Bhat writes, and what is your advice for budding writers?
Again, this is something people ask me, and I usually say I don't know, because I think I don't like to give generic advice. I think I like to meet people and then get to know them, and then if I understand where they're coming from, because now like people do ask me, like they ask me to be their mentor, they ask me to help them, and yeah, I would not probably just say generic things. I would probably, depending on what style they're writing, depending on what they're trying to say, and if I even like their writing or if I like them as a person. There's so many things. And the thing is, writing is extremely solitary and it's extremely self-driven and motivated, or like any art or any profession. And I don't think just hearing me say something is going to be the reason why I choose to do something. I think you'll have a deep conviction or determination to do something, and then people resonate with you. People give you pieces of advice that then you think, okay, that helps me get further in that goal. But I don't think if anyone can give you the spark, I think you would already be going in that direction, and you meet people who help you move further on that path. So I would like to help those people, but they have to come to me properly, I think. Thank you.
You are very welcome. And yeah, it was. Do you have any, closing lines for us, Kiran?
Just thank you. Thank you for being willing to help me, even though, I'm still starting with this and it's still building its base and it's still building itself. So thank you. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and best wishes in all your endeavors. I know you'll put your best out there.
Yes,
thank you.
Well.